Yeah, great, thanks. Okay, so what I'm presenting today is a work in progress with my co-author Sergio Galletto from Barcelona and Benny Hess, a professor in University of Oslo. So the paper is titled Abandon Ship, Party Brands and Politician Responses to a Political Scandal. So what is the point of this paper? Here we want to study how politicians reacted to a corruption scandal. So in other papers during this workshop, we saw, for instance, how voters react to a corruption scandal. Here, our focus is on the other side of the market, okay? And we all know that political scandal matters for politician career, they might matter for governance. This is kind of based on anecdotal evidence. So here we kind of have an academic approach and try to see what we can learn out of natural experiments in terms of how politicians react to a corruption scandal. So probably some of the most interesting results are the two highlighted here, such as that political scandal have implication behind the politician involved in the scandal. Why? Because corruption scandal affect the party brand. What is the party brand? Is the value of being affiliated to a party, right? So what is the idea here? If a corruption scandal hit a specific party, the party brand, the value of this party goes down. So for you as a politician affiliated to this party, this is something bad, negative. So what you will do is to move away from this party, okay? So this is a kind of individual decision making. And we will observe different types of moving away. We will see people leaving politics, leaving the party, switching to another party, and so on. But also this has an impact at the aggregate level, because if politicians move away from a party and this party is the incumbent, we will have political instability. Okay, so this is a bit the story I'm going to tell you. How do we test this? Empirically, we exploit a corruption scandal that took place at the national level, and we look at the effect at the local level. So the scandal hit a specific party at the national level, and we look at city ruled by this party, so at the local level, okay? So what is the contribution of this paper? So I believe that per se observing how politicians reacted to a corruption scandal is interesting. It's interesting because politicians have a crucial role in our society, and the way they reacted to a scandal might affect the governance, might affect policy making, and so on. And there might be many questions related to the consequence of a political scandal. Here I highlight a few of them. When does a scandal matter? In which type of government? In which type of institutional environment? How the politician involved react, but also how the politician not involved react. How the governance is affected, how different incumbents react differently based on their support, based on the level of electoral competition, and so on. So what is our contribution here? There is a huge academic literature in political economy that focuses on political accountability. And what we know basically is that the voters punish corrupt incumbents. And there are some influential papers that you see highlighted here that give us a kind of a strong evidence about this, okay? But if you think about the timing of the event, when there is a corruption scandal, before the voter reaction, there is the reaction of the incumbent, the reaction of the government that is accused of corruption. So when in those studies we observe the effect of a corruption scandal on voting, we are missing this intermediate step, such as how the incumbent reacts. And then we might observe voter reaction, which is mediated by the incumbent reaction. So this is what we focus here in this paper. So we also contribute to the literature of government instability because we show that a corruption scandal might lead to a short-term political instability, and we are interested in political instability as economists because this might have some macro effect. We also show that party labels, so the value of a party brand, matter a lot in current democracies. Just think about what's going on in these days in France, about a lot of people from the socialist parties moving away from this party because the value of this party brand is not useful anymore to them. And we show that corruption scandal can be transmitted to party queues. So a scandal taking place at the national level then can be transmitted at the local level following party queues. We also show some preliminary evidence about the effectiveness of switching party. So you switch party in order to exploit the party brand or another group or another political group, we show whether this is effective or not in terms of voters rewarding this. So let me be a bit more precise about the hypothesis we're going to test, okay? So our idea is that a negative popularity shock, so a corruption scandal in this case, affects the value of a party brand, decreases the value of a party brand, okay? So in turn, a politician will re-optimize their strategy in terms of respect to their desired level of association with this party. So what is the mechanism here? For sure, it's a poor popularity effect. So the fact that you don't want to be associated with a party that people perceive as corrupt. However, there might be other mechanisms, because you might not want to be affiliated to a party that is losing influence, because for you as a politician, this might decrease your rent-seeking opportunities. Okay? Also, on the side of voters, voters might not want to vote for a party that is losing influence and therefore is unable to bring, for instance, transfer to a certain city. Okay, so in turn, what will happen? A rational politician will move away from this party. So if this party is ruling a certain city, a certain country, this might lead to political instability because there is less party discipline, because if you have many parties in the coalition and they move away, clearly you don't have anymore the support to rule a government and so on. This is kind of an aggregate level. At the individual level, we might expect a different behavior. Politicians that leave this party and leave politics altogether. Politicians that decide to run as independent, politicians that switch party in order to exploit another party brand. So now I'll tell you a bit about the natural experiment I'm going to exploit. So this political scandal in Italian is called Tangentopoli, that means a bribe city, and it's the biggest corruption scandal in Italian modern history since Italy is a republic. It took place at the beginning of the 90s. From 1992 to 1994, at the end of the scandal, 1/4 of the national deputies was charged with the corruption. Okay, so huge scandal. And those deputies basically were elected across all Italian region, but they were mostly elected in the two incumbent party, the Christian Democrat and the Italian Socialist Party. So the Christian Democrat at this point were ruling Italy without any interruption for almost 50 years. So they were they had an incredible power in the country. And as we are going to look at the local level, what we want in order to exploit this scandal is that the timing of the scandal is unexpected by local politicians. And what was about the scandal? There were many types of corruption charges, but the main one concerned an established system of corruption whereby firms, in order to get the public procurement, had systematically to pay bribes to those two political parties that were the incumbent parties. Okay? So this is a bit the timing. The scandal started at the beginning of 1992. At that point, the leader of the Italian Socialist Party was saying that he was the victim. After a few months, he revealed that actually this system was kind of normal, that this was going on for decades and so on. After he fled the country and he never came back in order to not to be arrested. The peak of charges was reached in 1993. Now I'll show you a graph about this, and then the scandal ended in 1994. We will have election at the beginning of the scandal and at the end of the scandal. So historians talk about this scandal as a breaking point between the First and the Second Republic. The Second Republic is the period in which we will see the election of Silvio Berlusconi, that somehow represents a reaction to the disruption of this old political system. And also important for our identification strategy, during this period we have local election every year. Okay, this is a bit how it looks, descriptive statistics about the corruption scandal across those 3 years, and you see the peak in 1993 in the two incumbent party, the DC PSI, Christian Democrats and Italian Socialist Party. Only few politicians were elected in the main opposition party, that was the Communist Party here. So I could show you many first page or newspaper to show you how salient was this topic. Instead, I'll show you this graph that basically look at citation in Google Books about two words in Italian, football and corruption, and you see that football used to be more popular, then the two things are equally popular, but During this period of the scandal is the only period in which corruption became more silent than football in Italy. So just to let you understand how important was this at the time. So just a few things about the institutional background here. Proportional system at the national level with the district at regional level. So there was a kind of accountability compared to the local level. You were electing your deputies at that time based on where you lived, okay? And as I said, there was there were those two parties that represented a kind of a centrist bloc that were ruling Italy in a coalition. Then there is the main opponent, the Italian Communist Party, that then it was split into a leftish party. So we follow this as a leftish bloc. And again, they were marginally hit by the scandal because some politicians were corrupt also in this leftish bloc. And then we have other minor parties. Local level, kind of similar. We have a proportional electoral law that then changed in 1993. So we follow these changes. After this change, the mayor was directly elected at the local level. Important for us, at the local level, we see the same party that we have in the parliament. So we see the Communists, the Christian Democrats, the Italian Socialist Party at the local level, plus another important player, civic party. So what is a civic party? A party without any national affiliation. They are based on a local politician that run only in a town, and usually the party reports the name of this politician. So without any affiliation, usually without an explicit ideological direction. Okay, so this is the distribution across Italy of those three blocks in city council, where I look at the party affiliation of the mayor. You see clearly there is a clustering in central Italy of the leftish, of the Communist Party, while the centrist party was the most important. But important for us, you see geographical variation in those three groups across all regions. So they are all represented around the country. So how do we define government crisis in city? So as I anticipated, one of the outcome variables is that this kind of moving away lead to government instability. How do we measure it? In a very similar level to the way we intend government instability at the national level. So we usually think government instability when the government loses support, then there are new elections or a political deadlock. This is very similar. We have instability and early election in cities where more than 50% of the council resign. It means the government doesn't have the support anymore. When the budget is not approved on time, why? Again, for a political deadlock, inability of the government to approve this budget. And also if the mayor resigns or the councillor vote for the mayor's impeachment. Okay, so very similar reason to what we observe at the national level. So we will empirically have a dummy here, in the case a city has early election due to these cases all related to political instability. What happens after this government crisis? There are early elections. In the meanwhile, there is a commissioner appointed to rule the city up to 12 months that doesn't take any relevant policy decision. Okay, so this is a bit how it looks, the descriptive statistics. The scandal started in 1992 and in 1994. This is our pre-period. And we look at those four groups, the centrist bloc, Christian Democrats, Socialist Party. And you see that in the period of the scandal, it appears to be a higher level of government instability compared to the other two groups, and especially compared to the group of civic party that here it's called other parties. So those are cities that were ruled by civic parties. You see, descriptive statistics, not much going on in terms of political instability. So now I'm going to estimate these results in a causal way, okay? So in empirical analysis, I'm going to exploit a diff in diff, where I'm going to look at whether being a city ruled by the centrist bloc before and during the scandal has an impact on the dependent variable that is a dummy equal 1 if in a certain year, in a certain city, we have government instability. If we have early election due to political instability, okay? So I'm interested in the interaction term here. Some assumption, reasoning behind this estimation is that the party labels are important because we expect that politicians anticipate that voter will be very pissed off because there is this big corruption scandal at the national level. So they react, they anticipate voter reaction and resign. They move away from cities that were ruled by this coalition. Okay, this is the intuition again. The timing of Tangentopoli was unexpected. The time of the scandal has to be unexpected. And only few local politicians actually have to be corrupt. Otherwise, all this story will be completely endogenous and will have political instability, not because of this national local story of party queues, but simply because local politicians are actually corrupted. Okay, so if I have time, I'll show you some robustness tests about those two assumptions here. Okay, those are the main some of the main results where I see here that the interaction term tell us that basically during the period of the scandal, city ruled by this party hit by the scandal at the national level are more likely to have political instability. Okay, so the effect here is about 40% of a standard deviation. That is it's a very big effect. But given this big scandal, I think it makes sense to expect a big effect. So here the control groups include both the communist city and the city ruled by civic party. But in fact, the effect is totally driven by the control group of civic party. So apparently the spillover of those scandal cover also the communist party. In fact, when we compare city ruled by communist party against the civic party, we see again the same effect. So why this is the case? I guess, as Tommaso suggested in his speech yesterday, this might be the case because citizens are not completely able to disentangle who is accountable for corruption. So in this case, they were punishing, or actually the politicians were expected to be punished, even if they weren't directly affiliated to the party hit by the scandal, because the scandal, in a way, hit all national politicians. So the only ones saved were the one running in civic parties without any national affiliation. So this is a test of the pre-trend where we don't see much going on. This is the control group with the control group including only the communists. We don't see much of an effect, while this is the effect we find that is driven by the control group of civic parties. Okay, and we see that the effect is already here from the first year, and then it gets stronger in 1993 when there is the peak of charges, as I showed at the beginning. Okay, one of the questions one of the important caveat of the analysis is that in this period there were other things going on. There was an economic crisis, a lot of things were going on in the world. So you might think, look, if we observe this instability, it's not because of the scandal, because people were generally angry with the incumbent, the centrist bloc, for other reasons. So in order to provide a bit more evidence about the story, the mechanism, here I look at the triple interaction between being a city ruled by the centrist bloc in the period of the scandal in province where many national deputies were accused, were charged with corruption. Okay, so this is a variation at the province regional level, and we see that this effect is reinforced. So we have much more instability in those areas. And here I look at the absolute number or the share of national corrupt politicians. Also, as anticipated at the beginning, it is important to see whether all incumbents are punished similarly. This is not the case. We see that weaker incumbents are punished the most, are more likely to experience this government stability. So again, this is a triple interaction with the level of political fragmentation, of the level of electoral accountability. So in cities where there was more electoral competition, all this story was just more likely. So far I show you the aggregate results. What happened at the city level? Well, what is my idea here is that individuals, they change their behavior. They re-optimize their strategy. They want to move away from this party. So this might take place if you are in this party and you want to be elected at the next election, so you want to change party. It might happen within a party in the same coalition that don't want to be associated with these corrupt parties. So now I'm going to show you individual evidence. So how politicians effectively change their behavior. So first I show you this graph that it includes all elected politicians coming from this centrist bloc, corrupt bloc. So here you see before the scandal, 1991, and we look at cities that had election in 1991. So basically, all the politicians that were elected in the Christian Democrat and the Socialist Party in 1991, they were actually coming in the previous electoral term from the same party. So that's why these two bars are very similar. This is the part of destination and this is the part of origin. Very simple. Not much is going on here. But we see a completely different picture in 1993 and 1995 because of the scandal, right? So what we see here is that only half of them is re-elected in the same type of party. And we see something similar in 1995, in the year after the scandal. So where they were running instead, they were running in those civic parties. So in those parties that had any type of association with those national corrupt party. So this is like in line with what I told you so far. A caveat here is that I observe only elected politicians. So, you know, they might have simply left politics. So this is what I'm going to show you in the next slide, focusing on the candidates. So here I focus on mayoral candidates. And I see that those mayoral candidates, so the incumbents that were elected in a previous electoral term in this centrist bloc, are now much less likely to rerun for re-election. So in line with the idea that this scandal was discouraging them. The opposite, we see the opposite for mayors coming from civic parties. So they are more likely to run again. Okay? So was it motivated? Were they right in doing this type of decision? We here focus on the effect of re-election, so those ones that effectively were rerunning, and we see that they were strongly punished by voters, the ones that were rerunning and coming from the Christian Democrats and the Italian Socialist Party. Again, we see the opposite for those ones coming from the civic party. They are more likely to be voted. Okay? Here, in this last line, I look at those that were in the previous term elected with the centrist bloc, the corrupt bloc, and I look at those of them that decided to rerun in another type of party, in the civic party. And so this is an interaction, and you see that the effect is marginally positive. So what does it mean? That those ones that were switching brand, they were switching party, they were effectively rewarded by voters. So this is somehow effective for them. The overall effect remains negative, but we see a positive coefficient here. Okay, so this story of switching brand seems somehow to work. Of course, this is not a causal impact because it's just an interaction term. So there is a self-selection of those mayors that decided to change brand. Okay, very quickly, 5 minutes, great. So very quickly about robustness tests we do. Firstly, we have to exclude that what is going on here, it's not a story of local corruption. We want that only national corrupt politicians drive all this story. So how do we check for this? Firstly, we drop capital cities because we know that there were local corrupt politicians, especially in big cities. In fact, the scandal started in Milan, and this doesn't change much. Then we do something a bit more interesting. So we look at local news from two main newspapers that cover about 20% of Italian cities, one in the north and one in the south. And we look at digitalized local news from this period. So we do this only on 20% of the cities because it's very difficult to find digitalized local news. Okay? So what we find is that we find articles about 124 cases of political instability in city ruled by the centrist corrupt bloc, and 13% of them are linked also to charges of local politicians, but the percentage is much higher, about 25% for the cases of instability in a city ruled by other parties. Okay, so if we have to believe this test, we estimate before a lower bound of the real effect. Okay. Econometrically, I'm going to retest the analysis of this subsample, and then I'm going to drop those cases, and I'll show you that the results are not affected. So this is an example of a newspaper article. So this is, it's interesting because in the same page I have the two cases. This is linked to simply a political deadlock. So my story, there's not any more support for the local incumbent, and it's basically political parties are unable to find an agreement. Here we have an opposite story, where we have local instability, political instability, due to local corruption. So this was public procurement given to the brother of the alderman of the local minister. And this is an interesting piece for us because provides anecdotic evidence about our story. It's a journalist writing about the simultaneous political instability in 10 different cities and linking this to this national scandal. And okay, this is the econometrical test on this subsample of cities. where here it's the entire sample, and here I drop the city that where effectively there was also some local corruption. Last robustness test is, I didn't tell you that at the end of this big scandal, actually I told you, the Christian Democrats disappeared. So after having ruled Italy for 50 years, they completely disappeared from the political arena. So what I want to avoid is that what I observe is not just a mechanical effect, because politicians had to actually leave this party, they have no choice. So as a first, that is the main test, of course, we follow the parties that were created out of the fragmentations of these big parties, so the different type of areas or movements within this party, created new parties. We follow them and see whether politicians are affiliated after the scandal to those other small parties. So even if we don't believe, however, the relevance of this test, because you might say, okay, it's not the same comparing a party that ruled Italy for 50 years with these insignificant small parties, we have a bunch of robustness tests showing that our scandal, our results hold before a day we identify, which we believe it's a plausible day from which we can expect politicians anticipated the dissolution of this big party. Why we are able to identify a day? Because on this day, 13 June 2003, was the first day in which the secretary of this party said, look, things are going very bad, the party might get dissolved. And the reaction of the elite of the party was so bad that after today he had to say the journalists didn't understand me, I never said this. And the day after, the Pope said that the Christian Democrats do not dare to be dissolved. Okay, so we believe these days was a kind of crucial for local politicians to expect that something very bad could happen to this party, leading then to the dissolution. So we test our results before and after this day, and the results hold. Indeed, we don't see an increase in stability after this day. And of course, this cannot explain the results. We are comparing the Communist Party with the Civic Party, as the Communist Party wasn't dissolved, or actually the leftist party, included in this leftish bloc. Okay, so what is the conclusion of this story? We see that political scandal have a substantial effect, not only on politician career. Obviously, they have an effect on the career of politicians involved in the scandal, but also on the career of politicians not involved in the scandal, as they reoptimize the strategy in a different way, leaving politics, switching party, running as independent, and so on. This has an aggregate effect because it might lead to short-term political instability and government crisis. We show that party labels are very important, as they might lead to this corruption scandal to spread across a different level of government. And finally, I think it's kind of interesting to show that individual decision-making might lead automatically to this political instability. Because usually we think about political instability as a collective decision-making. While here it's more likely to be something related to individual incentive that altogether they lead to this aggregate effect. Okay, thanks.
Okay, thanks. We have time for questions. Yeah.
Okay, your analysis doesn't include, if I have understood properly, the fact that in 1993 or in those years, the way the mayor in Italy was elected changed dramatically, because before mayors were appointed, well, there was a proportional representation, so mayors were appointed by the national parties, whereas after that, mayors were directly elected by voters. So besides the scandal that certainly had an effect, it was after this institutional reform, it was a lot more convenient for candidates who had a very strong local affiliation or local ties to present themselves in a civic list, especially in small municipalities. And I think that what you attribute only to the scandal could be the compound effect of these two, compound result of these two effects. And I think you should disentangle that.
Yeah, so this is captured by the year fixed effects, mostly. And I mean, this is the easy answer. Indeed, the results hold also for 1992, where there was still an old electoral law. But, you know, I believe the fixed effects are able to cover any type of time common effect, because this took place in all municipalities. So I look at the interaction.
maybe you should look, you should test also for municipalities of different size. For instance, the municipalities that have the direct election of this, below, for instance, I think it was 12,000 inhabitants or something like that. Probably the phenomenon of civic list is much more frequent, and therefore, if you see that the results are all the same in these two types of cities.
Yeah, but the direct election of the mayor took place in all cities at the same time. There was a change in the runoff, but yeah.
So I wanted to ask, is it so you uncover this effect on party relabeling of politicians. Is the mechanism, is the effect driven by the fact that politicians try successfully to fool voters, or is it because the voters expect party switchers to not depend on party guidelines during the mandate? These are quite different mechanisms, no? In one, the voter is fooled, and the other one, in the other mechanism, the voter is correctly perhaps anticipating a detachment of the politician in the future from nasty guidelines that might come from the party.
Yeah, I agree with you. They can be both plausible. We do not investigate this so much right now. Maybe we might do it more in the future. It's clearly difficult because, you know, it's not completely a causal effect because there is a self-selection of politicians who are moving from a party to another. Something we are planning to do, it's not really related to this, but I think it's very important. We are going to look at the effect of this scandal on local budget. So here we look only at the political effects, but we are going to extend the analysis also to the effect on policy making. So this might also uncover some dynamics going on in terms of politicians trying to fool voters and so on.
Thank you very much for presentation. But, I had a feeling that this is very much country-specific research, because very often when we see any corruption or tax evasion scandals across the world, there might be very different responses by the voters depending on local customs, local values, local perceptions of what is wrong and what is not, what is acceptable and what is not. And I think the most recent, I don't know whether we can call Panama Papers most recent, but one of the most scandalous revealings, and we could see clearly that, for example, the response in Iceland was so much different than the response in for example, in Russia, where the outcomings from the scandal was, I think, more severe even than the ones in Iceland. And obviously the local perceptions of what's wrong, what's not, what's acceptable, what is not, what is in their powers to change and what's not, which also, I think, plays some role. And also, it's very interesting to see the Trump phenomenon, where somebody who has clearly said, well, have evaded tax and I'm smart because I'm not paying tax, and yet get to be elected. And that's very much to do with the local values and perceptions, but I think it's very much country specific and to do with the values in each society.
Yeah, I completely agree. No, in fact, the external validity is clearly limited, as I think in every case we focus only on one country, because we are focused on one country in a specific period of time and so on. So I totally agree with you. Like, why do we care so much about this kind of natural experiment? Because they can uncover a mechanism and very detailed effect that we can detect in what we call the causal way. And this is possible, unfortunately, in most of the cases, but not always, when we have a very homogeneous framework, so only one country in this case, and a lot of variation within a country, so cities. I completely agree with you, and of course, this type of studies has to be complemented by studies that look at across countries' variation, in order to, you know, uncover how values, institutions have an effect on all those accountability dynamics and so on. For instance, in the case of Trump, it's clear that American attitude toward tax evasion are very different than French attitudes toward tax evasion. So clearly this is extremely relevant, and I totally share your point.
Yeah, last question, and we have to move on.
Yeah. So first, I would like to follow up the previous remark. I think the two examples you gave are perhaps not proving your point, because Iceland and Russia are completely different environments. There are no elections in Russia. And Trump, again, is a different story, because Trump, the implied by you scandal was not during him being in the office. It's a different story. So these are the scandals when politicians are in the office. It's completely different. My question is, did you look at previous history of this politician? Because many politicians might have some minor scandals or being suspected to, but not proved to have some negative history. And does it imply that they were more likely to switch parties in this case?
No, what we do in terms of looking at local politicians is this analysis, but it's related to the link between having local politicians charged with corruption and political instability. We don't look at this. It's a bit. It will be clearly very interesting and it's a bit challenging in terms of data analysis to recover local news from this period, but it's potentially feasible. Thanks.
Just Googling them in previous years.
Google doesn't work from the 80s. That's a key drawback. Because we are looking about local council of towns over 10,000 inhabitants in 1980s, in the 80s.
Okay, thanks a lot, John.
Thanks.